Serial crimes are disturbing, tragic, and deeply unsettling, especially when the violence isn't done by one person, but by two or more working together. In most cases, these partnerships are built on manipulation, control, fear, or shared obsession, and the results can be devastating. This video is a historical overview meant for awareness and education. We will not show graphic imagery or describe explicit details. Our focus is on the facts, the investigations, and the outcomes, while remembering that behind every case were real victims and grieving families. If you prefer lighter content, feel free to skip this one. Otherwise, let's begin. Number 10. Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka, Canada. Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka became one of Canada's most infamous criminal couples. They met in the late 1980s and later married, appearing outwardly normal to many people around them. But investigators later uncovered a hidden life connected to violent crimes involving young victims. Authorities eventually connected Bernardo to multiple assaults using DNA evidence. As the investigation widened, Homolka began cooperating with police and later testified, which helped secure major convictions. Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison, while Homolka's plea deal became one of the most controversial legal outcomes in Canadian history. This case still stands as a reminder that appearances can hide shocking realities. Number 9. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, England. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley are known in England as the Moors murderers. Their crimes took place in the 1960s and involved multiple young victims. They used deception and trust to lure victims into their control, making the crimes even more disturbing. The case began to unravel when someone close to them reported what they had witnessed, leading police toward evidence that exposed the full scale of what happened. Both were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Decades later, the case remains one of the darkest chapters in modern British criminal history. Number 8. Gerald and Charlene Gallego, United States. Gerald and Charlene Gallego operated in the western United States during the late 1970s. Their relationship involved intense control and manipulation, with Gerald dominating much of Charlene's life. Over time, the couple became connected to a string of kidnappings and murders. Their capture was helped by key witness information, including a vehicle detail that allowed investigators to track their movements and identify them. Charlene later cooperated with authorities and received a reduced sentence. Gerald was convicted and remained in prison until his death. Number 7. Wolfgang Abel and Marco Furlan, Italy. Wolfgang Abel and Marco Furlan were tied to a series of crimes in Italy over several years. At multiple crime scenes, they left messages signed with the name Ludwig, along with extremist symbolism and hateful statements. Investigators believe their crimes were driven by violent ideology. Many of the victims were from vulnerable or marginalized communities, making the case especially tragic and disturbing. After years of investigation and court proceedings, they were convicted for murders linked to their crimes. The case remains a brutal example of how hate and violence can combine into something terrifying. Number 6. Fred and Rosemary, West England. Few cases in England are as infamous as Fred and Rosemary West. Their crimes involved multiple victims across several years, including people within their personal orbit. The investigation became widely known after authorities reopened a missing person case and searched their property. As evidence emerged, the scale of the crimes shocked the public and became a major national case. Fred West died before his trial could be completed, while Rosemary West was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of long-term abuse hidden behind closed doors. Number 5. Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate, United States, in 1958. Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate became known for a violent spree across multiple locations in the United States. Starkweather was a teenager at the time, and Fugate was even younger. After a deadly incident at Fugate's home, the pair fled, and more killings followed as they tried to evade capture. Their crime spree ended after a confrontation on the road led to police closing in quickly. Starkweather was later executed, while Fugate received a life sentence and was eventually released years later. The case remains widely discussed, especially around the topic of influence, coercion, and accountability. Number 4. Dean Corll, Elmer Henley, and David Brooks, United States. Dean Corley is remembered for one of the most horrifying murder cases in Texas history. Coral was assisted by teenagers Elmer Henley and David Brooks, who helped lure young victims into Coral's control. What followed were terrible crimes that lasted years before finally coming to an end. The case ultimately collapsed when Henley killed Coral during a confrontation, and authorities quickly uncovered the truth through investigation and recovered evidence. Henley was sentenced to multiple life terms. Brooks was also convicted and sentenced to prison. The case remains a chilling example of how manipulation can draw others into horrific acts. Number 3. Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. United States. Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole are known not only for murder, but also for the controversy surrounding their confessions. The two met in the 1970s and later became connected to a wave of confessions involving hundreds of murders across different states. But over time, many investigators and experts questioned the accuracy of those claims. Some confessions were later recanted, and critics argued that intense interrogations may have influenced parts of their statements. Even so, both men were convicted for several murders. This case is often discussed as a warning about false confessions and why investigators must confirm every claim with solid evidence. Number 2. Changxin, Liao, and Changxin. Husi, China. This case takes us back to 1945 in China, involving two innkeepers accused of killing travelers. The case came to light after reports grew from locals and families of missing loved ones. Investigations pointed back to the inn the pair operated. Authorities later alleged that the victims were robbed and killed, most believed to be guests passing through. Both suspects were convicted and executed. It remains one of the most shocking historical examples of crimes hidden in plain sight. Number 1. Delfina and Maria Gonzalez, Mexico. One of the most infamous serial crime cases in Mexico involves the sisters Delfina and Maria Gonzalez, known as Las Poquianques. They were accused of running a brutal operation in the mid-1900s that exploited vulnerable women. Investigators later uncovered disturbing evidence, including many victims connected to their property. Authorities alleged that women were recruited under false promises and later trapped, exploited, and killed when they were no longer useful to the operation. The sisters were convicted and sentenced to prison. Their case is remembered as a horrific example of exploitation, abuse, and cruelty aimed at people who had little protection. These cases are some of the darkest examples of what can happen when violent individuals work together, feeding each other's impulses, reinforcing harmful thinking, and escalating crimes that might never have happened alone. If there's one lesson that history keeps repeating, it's that early warning signs matter. Missing person cases deserve urgent attention, and victims must always be taken seriously. If you want more documentary-style storytelling focused on real investigations and outcomes, with respectful, non-graphic narration, follow for more. Stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next video.